this third video, I'm going to show you how to make the base of our lantern using Transpose tools as well as radial symmetry. In addition to that, I'm going to show you how we make our edges here to support our lattice. So going back to our tool that we were just working on, you can see that we have our lattice where we left it off. I recommend to save this subtool again before you get started. And let's go ahead and show our see-through mode again to see where we are with our back piece. What I'm going to be focusing on now is you can see this nice ridge that we start with, and then you can see it tapers down to another piece, a longer part in the center, and then finally a small base piece. So we're going to make all those using the Transpose tools, and then we're going to come in and make these divots as well as some nice designs on our piece. So I'm going to turn off my see-through mode and we'll kind of look back and forth. This to me looks like it's about the right size. I'm looking at the base cylinder that we have from our original lantern. So I just want to kind of match it up, make sure it works at the bottom, and it does. So I realize I do need to scale this up a little bit. So going back underneath our deformation tools, I'm just going to scale this up on the X and Y because I like how my Z is right now, and this gives us a little bit more. Let's check our see-through mode again, and I think this is about right. It might be a little bit too big, so I'm going to scale it down just a bit. I think that's going to be just fine. And now I'm going to just move it up with the offset on the Z axis. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to turn off see-through mode and I'm going to get started with this. You can trace along if you want to really follow the dimensions of this, but I have an idea of what it looks like. So first thing I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to hide our top lattice here so that we're only looking at our base. I'm going to go ahead and use our marquee selection again, Control-Shift-Alt, and I'm going to hide everything but our bottom piece because I want to make a new polygroup for this. So I'm going to now mask this. I'm going to Control-W, which is going to give us a new polygroup. And I just press Shift-F to see my poly frame, and I'm going to click off this again. Control-Shift-Click this, and now we got everything back. You can see purple up top and orange on the bottom. This is what I want. And now with the Transpose tools, I'm just going to click here so it snaps to our surface and make sure that we're going either up or down. And one thing that's pretty cool is if you actually Control-Click any polygroup with Transpose mode on, it'll mask out your other surface. So see, now it actually masked our top. So I can clear that mask and Control-Shift-Click this, and you'll see the bottom is now masked. So we're going to use this to our advantage whenever we are using our extrusion tools. So let's go ahead and use this centerpiece. Click on that, and we've snapped to it. And once again, I Control-Click that so that we have a mask here. And now you can just test that out. If you want, you can move it around and you see the top parts are remaining still because they're masked. So let's go ahead and extrude this down once. I'm going to switch to my scale mode up here, and if I click on the middle piece, you can see that I can scale up or down, but what I want to actually do is make a new division in here. So if you hold down the Control key while clicking this middle white part, Control-Click, you'll see now that we actually have extruded a little bit. So I'm just going to come in right here. I like how that looks. And then now I'm going to go to my move mode, pressing W as my hotkey, and I'm going to once again press Control on this one, Control-Click, and pull this down. Now if you're not careful, if you're only doing Control, you'll see that it's kind of moving around, so just hold down the Shift, and then that way you can lock it to the Z axis. So I'm going to pull that down just a bit. We can take a look at our see-through mode, see the stepping that's underneath, and I notice that there's a slight taper that comes in on this. So with this still selected, I'm going to go back to our scale mode by pressing the E hotkey, and I'm going to hold down Shift when I scale this time. So Shift and then clicking, and let's pull it down just a bit. You see we have a little bit of a taper. If we go to our side view, you can see that we have that in there, kind of nice, and I like how that looks. So now I'm going to do one more extrusion towards the bottom while I'm still in my scale mode. I'm going to Control-Shift-Click the center, Control-Shift-Click, and we've scaled in one more time. I think that's a pretty good edge, and now we'll do our big thicker taper. And for this one, I'm actually going to look at my see-through mode to see how big this is. I'm going to kind of eyeball it to the size of the lantern, and I think we're good. And I'm going to go back to my move mode again with W, and I'm going to Control-Shift-Click the center, Control-Shift-Click, and that makes an extrusion. So let's come down to about here, and then now let's scale this in, pressing E to get back to my scale mode. clicking, and when I'm doing this I'm just going to hold down shift. Looks like we have a pretty nice taper in there, so this looks about right to me. I'm going to do that. And you can see at the bottom here we have one more taper, one more extrusion, so let's go ahead and make that. And now I'm just going to click back down here on this surface so we can snap back down the bottom. So once again, while we're still in our scale mode, Control Shift click to center. Now we have a nice little extrusion there. Let's pull it down just a bit, go back to our move mode, click and shift and hold down. It's important to keep holding shift whenever you're doing this, because whenever we get into our radial symmetry mode, we need to make sure that everything has been extruded and scaled exactly, because we want everything to work nicely once we start doing our carvings and everything else. So just bear with me, make sure you're holding shift almost each time you move or scale whenever you're moving this stuff around. So let's go ahead and do one more move down to extrude, Control Shift click center. We have a nice little thick bottom piece. I'm going to go a little bit thicker because I'm going to do a mask on this later, and switch back to my scale mode with E and click in the center. I'm going to hold shift and scale this down just a bit. So now we have a nice base for our lantern. I'm going to clear my selection. I'm going to press Shift F, and now you see we have just the base. If I have Shift F again, you can see that this is still just only a few polygons. We've only got 60 faces in here. And now if we were to show everything else in the scene, it kind of sits nicely right underneath our lantern. So the next part I want to do is I want to actually Dynamesh this, because I'm going to build some pieces that come off the top here, as well as doing our creative designs that you saw on the base of the lantern. So if you remember, go underneath geometry, expand our Dynamesh panel, and let's turn this up into about the 300 range. I'm going to run this right now. And I think this is pretty good density, and I don't want it to get too heavy later because I'm going to combine it with a lot. So that 300 level is pretty good. So first thing I want to do in this case is I'm going to make our railings for our piece up here. So what I want to show you before we do that though is go to your subtool menu, hide everything except for your base, lock to your orthographic top view, and now go to your transform panel at the top, activate symmetry. Click this R that does radial symmetry, do your Z axis and turn off the X, and you'll see that we have radial cane of 8, so let's turn that to 6. And now you can see my cursor. If I start drawing in here, let's switch to a standard brush. Now you can see that we actually have a nice radial symmetry going, and this is really fun just even drawing around here, so have fun with it. And once again we have 6 sides, so that's why I wanted to have 6 pieces that we have right here. So if you remember, let's take a look at the see-through mode. And this back lantern piece has these rails that run up the front, so let's go ahead and make those. And this is going to be pretty easy to do, so let's show our lattice underneath. And we know that right around here we're going to have to create some masks that we can extrude up. So Control click up here on the brush. Let's switch to our mask lasso tool again. I'm going to zoom in just a bit, and keeping my radial symmetry activated, I'm just going to draw a little circle around here where I think our piece should be, and that looks pretty good to me, so let's use that. And I'm going to Control Alt click these off. You can actually turn that off in your brush settings, but I'm just going to unmask it this way. So one thing I want to show you now is if I press Shift F, you can see our polyframe. If I was to do Control W right now, that'll make a new poly group, which is what we want to do, but you can notice here that we still have a lot of faceting. So let's clean that up. Let's undo. So now we're back in our mask selection. If you come down here underneath poly groups and group masked, turn this polish up all the way to 1 and just click this, and now you can see we got a nice smooth division here, and that's what we want. So I'm going to clear our mask now. Actually we can just keep that. So keep the selection that you have and go to your Transpose tool mode, the W, and I'm actually going to turn off symmetry right now. So I'm going to press X as my hotkey. I'm going to click on this so it snaps my normal to the top here. And now if we click on the middle and then we start pulling up, you can press Shift and that'll lock it to the view. Press Shift F to show polyframe. You can see that we're getting a lot of faceting here, which is what we don't want. So let's undo that. Shift F again so you can see your polyframe. And once again, let's do the extrusion that we've been doing by holding down Control first and then clicking. And now you see we have a nice smooth part coming up. Hold down Shift again to snap it to the orthographic view. And now if we press Shift F, you can see we got a really nice extrusion. So I'm going to zoom out and let's go ahead and pull those all the way up. And now we have railings for our lantern. You might want to go a little bit thicker or thinner, but for me this is the thickness I decided to go with. So we should probably do one more Dynamesh on this in a minute, but before we do that, just because I want to keep my poly count low, you can see in here, since we extruded up, there's actually no subdivisions, so if you were to do your Dynamesh again, then we'll get nice subdivisions here. Before I do that, I'm actually going to come in and do some of my sculpts down here. So I'm going to clear my mask, and before I do that, let's go back to a brush mode. B standard will be fine for now. And clear this by control clicking on the side here, and I'm just going to isolate our view. We don't need to see our lattices underneath at the moment. So now we have just the base of our lantern again. And let's take a look once more at the base of the actual lantern from our 3D piece. You can see right here we have a nice little divot that I want to go in. This piece actually has legs and some other parts that come out, but we're not going to make that for this. So let's go ahead and keep our radial symmetry at 6, and we're going to make this kind of interesting design that you see here on the side. We'll do a quicker one, and then also these interesting little divots in here to give it some variety. So let's get out of see-through mode. And this is kind of nice that we're locked to this view, so first I'll make our little triangular sections. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to make sure that our symmetry is turned back on by pressing X. And this time I don't want to use my lasso mode, so I'm going to control click the brush, go back to our mask pen. So now you can see once we do a mask, it goes across all 6 regions here. So let's turn down our brush size. We need to get something that's pretty small. And let's go ahead and draw that out. Got a V here, half of the V, and let's recreate the other side. It's not perfectly centered, but you guys can take time to make it really, really nice if you'd like to. I'm just going to thicken this up a bit, maybe remove just a little bit from this side by doing Control-Alt clicking. And let's just top this off here a bit. Control click that, and then Control Shift click to sharpen our mask. So to me that looks pretty good, but I want to extrude this out, so now I'm going to do a Control click to invert from the side here. And I'm going to go to our transpose mode again, keeping our symmetry activated this time. I'm going to click on one of our pieces. I think this is a good angle to go to, so I'm going to go here and just kind of select this out so I lock it to an axis. It looks a little junky at the moment and chunky, but that's okay because once we re-Dynamesh this, we'll get some nice topology. And now I'm going to turn off my symmetry and actually go to my orthographic view and drag out another selection, but just move it up a little bit because I want this to kind of penetrate the top portion here. Dynamesh is going to clean that up for us. So we have a little bit of an extrusion. It's not perfect, but I'm cool with it. So let's go ahead and run Dynamesh one time. This may take a few seconds to process, and this will clean up our parts here, and then you'll see it'll smooth this out a bit and give us a nice connection. So since Dynamesh is activated on the side, I'm just going to Control click on the side here, and if you look up top, that's actually going to activate our Dynamesh. Okay, let's press Shift F and see how much topology we have. Now you can see we have a lot of topology up top, and also the cool thing is Dynamesh is really smart and it connects these pieces together that normally weren't welded. And from a distance, this is going to look fine. You know, we don't have to have it super crisp in here on the sides. Next, let's go ahead and make some divots in this. So if you look in our see-through mode, there's like an actual cutout in here. So I'm going to show you 2 cool techniques. Let's snap back to our orthographic view on this side. If you go to your light box, let's pull that up. Go to your brush menu here and go to your trim brushes. This one's not standardly loaded, but trim front brush, this is really cool. Load up that brush. This basically will flatten anything out based on your camera view. So I'm going to pull this up just a bit, and then you can see here it's actually flattening out a little bit. And if we were to go to the side view, see how this is actually cutting in perfectly on the side. We want to do that. So I'm going to undo that real quick and make sure that my radial symmetry is on. So X, now everything is on perfectly. And let's drag that out. So now I have just a little divot. That's all I need at the moment because I just want something flat to snap my transform tool to, or transpose tool. So let's press W to go back to move mode. Let's click this because that'll snap it right to the front view here. And now another cool tool is on the inside here. If you see where the red selection is, if you right click this and start dragging inward, you'll see that everything starts to flatten out. Now the problem is I didn't mask this selection in here, so let's go back to brush mode, standard, and let's give this a quick mask selection on everything here. Might be more accurate if you do lasso, so I'm going to control click the brush, mask lasso, and now let's drag this out, and we have a pretty good selection. I think I got a little bit too far here on the edge. Let's invert that selection by control click on the side. You also see that it came up here a bit, so I'm going to just make sure this fills in. So now we just have a selection that we want only on these pieces. So let's go back to our transpose mode by pressing W, and it's already snapped to the surface from a moment ago. So I'm just going to lock to my right view. And now if we, once again, if we go to this right section here and right click, and we start moving back, you'll see that it's actually flattening out to that surface. So right there, that looks pretty good to me. And once again, the geo's not super clean in here, but once we run the Dynamesh in a few minutes, it's going to clean all that up. So now we have a nice little cut on the inside. Let's go back to our brush mode, standard. Let's clear that selection. Now you see that we have a nice divot. Next, let's go ahead and make the interesting design that's happening here. You can look up some reference if you want, or come up with a cool floral pattern. I'm just going to do something off the top of my head, and I'm locking now to this other front view so that I can work with this section here. And this one I'm going to keep my mask pen back selected again. I'm going to turn my brush size down a little bit, and let's just kind of give this I guess a basic circle. We can do some kind of sunflower looking type thing, and I'm going to go even a little bit smaller on my brush, and let's just give it some little petals. This looks very elementary, but it does its purpose, and whenever you see it all combined with everything, I think it's going to be just fine. So we're pulling that out. Let's just give it some interesting little designs here. Maybe give it a amoeba-like shape in the center. And over here, let's just give some interesting kind of little tribal designs. I think I'll do it here as well. Okay, now I'm going to control shift click this again just to sharpen our mask. And I'm going to invert our mask again by control clicking out here. Oops, undo that. Control click, there we go. And once again, I'm going to go to my orthographic view and my transpose mode. Let's click that. And let's go ahead and drag this out. I've got it locked to this view, so I'm going to click and then press shift so it just kind of comes out evenly. That looks good to me. I'm going to clear our selection by control clicking outside. And once again, let's go ahead and run the Dynamesh, and that'll clean up all this stuff in here. Control click on the outside. And once again, we'll just wait a minute while this projects. You can see it up top. Almost done. Alright, now we have everything with nice geometry. If I want to come in and start smoothing things out, like maybe let's say this stuff's feeling a little bit chunky for you, let's switch back to our standard brush mode. You can control click this. We're in the mask pen, that's cool. Let's just kind of drag in here, and then I'm going to invert that selection. And I'm going to blur this once by clicking my mask with the control on. And if we come back down here to the deformation tool and give it just a little bit of a relax, yeah, that smooths it out. Maybe a little bit too much, you know, maybe you want to keep those harsh edges a little bit more. So there you go, that looks pretty good. And you could come in and sharpen these more if you wanted to, but for our purposes I'm just going to keep it like this. So now we have a nice base to our lantern here. You'll see in my piece in the bottom we actually have some different kind of interesting designs, but for the purposes of getting through this demo a little bit quicker, let's just come in and take a few minutes to just chip up the sides of this a little bit. And that's where I want to introduce you to one other cool brush that I use quite a bit. And if you pull up the light box and go back to our brush panel, let's go up. Go to the planar section. Let's see where that is, right here. And planar cut. This one. Double click that. This one's pretty cool. You can kind of go right along edges and get some really nice cuts. This is really good for just doing damage and different things. And we actually use this quite a bit at work. I think we did this for some gym looking structures as well. And you just click it right on whatever surface you want and it gets a nice little breakup on the side here. You can just play around with that and see what you think. You can also change the depth settings if you want, like how deep this goes with the brush selection. So let's just expand this little part here. You'll notice if we pull this over. And depth, if you were to pull this up or down, we can pull this down to go a little bit deeper. Now you can see it's really strong. So play around with that stuff, see what you like, and you can do some interesting kind of little breakups here. If it starts to feel mushy, you can just undo it a bit and then come in and just get a really nice crisp break. So let's do a little bit more damage on this, and I'm actually going to use our clay brush tool. So clay buildup is kind of nice sometimes for getting just some random looking damage on places, making it feel like you have a little bit of wear and tear. And I'm just keeping my symmetry mode on for now. I mean, that's gonna look a little bit funny, but I'm not too worried about it. If you want maybe to get a little bit more breakup, you could turn your radial symmetry down to something like 3. And then you can still get some breakup, but you won't see it right next to each other. It's a little bit further out, and that might be a little bit better suited for your purposes, so it doesn't look like it's repeating, but still allows you to get through everything pretty quick. So let's do one more thing. Let's Dynamesh this together now with our middle lattice. If you remember, we had this up here, our 2 lattices right here. I want to combine those all together. So I'm going to grab our selection right here and let's just move that up. By clicking this button, you can see that it's actually pushing it up here a bit in the subtool stack. Now let's go to the very top because I want to merge these down so I can make them all one subtool. Merge, merge down, merge down, one more time. So now these are all together. And once again, if you remember, this is where we want to Dynamesh it together, because if we don't, whenever we come in to do our damage and different things here, let's say I'm pressing Alt, if we were to smooth this out, you'll see the stuff actually separate. So whoever made this, they probably wanted this to all be together, you know, whatever jeweler or somebody that made this. So this one will take a little bit longer, but let's Dynamesh all these together and it's still active. So I'm going to do Control click on the side. And let's just wait a second here. And you'll see the projection is in progress up top. And now we're going to take everything and weld it together. And the cool thing about this is I used to do some metal jewelry work back in the day, like actually smithing with silver and different metals, and whenever you solder things together, this is a perfect example in CG where once these are Dynameshed together, you start adding like little solder marks where things connect and just make it feel a little bit more realistic. If you look at my Photoshop image, you can see in here I actually kind of did that around the side on the lantern. I made it feel like there's soldering and different breakup that would happen in between over the years of weathering. Alright, so it's done now. Everything's all together. And it looks like I may have actually even merged down one other piece in here by accident, but that's okay. No, I didn't. Alright, cool. So now if you wanted to, you could come in and do some final cuts or variations along your surface just to break it up, give it some damage along the sides, and maybe add some solder here on the base because your art director wants you to connect this all together and make it look real, which would normally be really hard to do, but with the Dynamesh features and everything we've done here, it's very easy. And the cool thing is since all of this is still, think of it itself as that original cylinder, it still remembers all of our radial symmetry. So we could press X Actually, now it's a new subtool, so let's do transform. Click R here, radial symmetry on the Z. Let's switch this back down to 6 sides. And you'll notice that the radial symmetry still works perfectly. So that's one thing I can't stress enough, how important it is to keep all this stuff centered in ZBrush World Space so that all of your symmetry tools will work properly for this type of thing. So yeah, just give it a little bit of detail. I'm just going to give it some random kind of cuts. I'm turning off my symmetry now, just to give it a little bit more damaging on different locations. You guys can spend more time on this if you want. I'm once again just going to go through here quickly. You know, once again, add some solder, do whatever you want on these pieces. And let's do one final thing now that all these pieces are together as one Dynamesh tool. Let's get some just general noise across the surface. If you look at our lantern again, the image here, you see all this tiny little bit of noise bits that's in here. This is actually just created using the noise tools within ZBrush. So I'm going to show you how to use that right now. Before we do, let's store a morph target of this piece. If you come down here to the bottom of our tools list, I believe it's right here, morph target, click that. And let's store a morph target. For those of you that don't know how this works, basically it retains a memory of what this shape is right now. So just a quick demonstration of what you can do is I'm going to go to my move tool. I'm going to scale this up quite a bit. I'm going to pull this out really far. And then I'm going to press B, M to isolate. Let's find our morph brush. See this? Since we stored a morph target, I can just start painting on this and it'll put it back to my original size that we had a minute ago. I'm just going to undo that a few times because I don't need that. So once again, you'll just store that and then you'll be good to go. So with our morph target stored, let's go in here now to surface setting. Click that. Click on this noise button and you'll see another little window pops up, and this works just like your ZBrush window. All the move tools, everything. And you can see there's some super tiny grain in here, but let's crank that up. So I'm going to turn up the strength on this a little bit and the scale. I want this to be a little bit bigger. Something like that feels about right, and this is almost getting us in that cast iron state, which is kind of cool. And then I'm going to play with these noise curves a bit, so just have fun with these. They react really quickly and you can get some nice features. Like right here, already to me that feels pretty good. I can play around with my scale and I think this works. So let's press OK. Now you'll see it on our object. Now this isn't actually committing to it yet, so now you have to do apply to mesh. And now we've actually got it on our mesh. So obviously this is too evenly distributed, the noise, but since we stored our morph target, we can use our morph brush that's still selected and start coming back in here to smooth out to our original surface that we had. So in this case, probably the areas that are going to get most corroded would be those that are exposed to the elements a bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our symmetry mode, our radial symmetry, and I'm just going to use our morph target or our morph brush on some of the front sides here that maybe these would be a little bit more smooth. I think I said that would be hit more a second ago, but yeah, let's just go with the flow. Maybe I want to pull out some of the designs that we were starting to lose on our pieces here in the middle. So I'll just run that across there. And also it's getting a little bit too noisy down here, so let's clean up some of these front faces. And I'm going to keep a little bit of that torn up detail on the bottom. Yeah, that's why, like, so many times now I used to go back to Max all the time when I was doing my Max or my whatever 3D application I'm using to do extrusions and different things and bring it back to ZBrush. But since all this radial symmetry works perfectly and it's easy to extrude using the Transpose tools, I never really go back anymore. I just stay completely in here. Alright, cool. I think this is going to work for us. Let's just do a quick BPR render and see how this looks in perspective mode. Okay, cool. I think we're almost there. So what I'm going to show you in the next video is how to make the lid and then the dragon. So let's take a little break and come back and see you in a second. Thank you.